We have Miriam, who's, almost said retired. She graduated last semester, but she's back to visit. She's going to help me kind of teach with Sarah, my internship student in biomechanics. And Margaret is up here, and they're going to talk just for a couple minutes, invite you guys to join and be involved in Women in Kinesiology Public. So you guys make sure to step in front of the camera so that your great-great-grandchildren can see you guys do a T-Rex.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Higginbotham. I am the Women in Kinesiology Society President, also known as WICS. The organization supports community and team building within the School of Kinesiology. Some of our goals are professional development, professional opportunities, mentorship, and in general, just discussing any issues related to women in healthcare. Our meetings will have guest speakers, a panel of healthcare professionals like OT, PT, chiropractor, etc. We also raise funds for an organization called Two Unstoppable, which aids women in their fight with cancer. Our first meeting is September 12th at 6:30 p.m. in room 157B. This club is open to all kinesiology majors, and you don't have to be a woman to join. But welcome to everybody. And I think that's it. Oh, you can join our group meeting. Our code is right here. And we also have an Instagram at ul.wix. Thank you. Oh, and our advisor is Dr. Campbell.
So when I was approached to be a faculty advisor for this organization, it was pretty humbling. Just 2 minutes of a quick backstory, but when I was in athletic training, I worked women's basketball, women's volleyball here at USL, and I got to see things from a different perspective in terms of how my girls we could use the weight room if we came in at 3 o'clock in the morning, like stuff like that. When I was at Southern Mississippi working on my master's, I worked women's volleyball and women's softball. And then when I was at Auburn, my major professor was a female, and I got to see academia through a female's perspective. Little things, like we'd be walking through campus, and I mean, she's my mentor. Like she is, my mom, my dad, and Dr. Weimer. And we'd be walking in campus, and we'd be with other professors, and a graduate student may say, Dr. Pasco, Dr. Gladden, Miss Weimer, right? And we'd be walking, she's like, did you catch that? I was like, yes, ma'am, I did. So there are different issues and topics and things that females in kinesiology have to experience and go through. And it's really awesome to kind of get a different perspective on those things. So, and when was the first meeting?
September 12th.
September 12th. Awesome. All right, you guys. Let's go ahead and get going today. So again, Miriam and Sarah are going to be helping me out. Remember, we are trying to do the so what of biomechanics. I only got you for 3 months, and to try to interject a full biomechanics course, it's tough. And that doesn't even count days we got to review and test. So my intent this semester is to just give you not only the so what, but the fun stuff that might strike your imagination. Say, man, I'd love to learn more about this. Or that's kind of cool. Tell me more. And I'll be happy to tell you more in office hours or on the side, or maybe you go to graduate school like Sarah plans to do and learn more about biomechanics, okay? So continuing on with Newton's laws, and I promise at the end of the class, we're gonna do an analogy and example with a bench press where we're gonna talk about linear kinetics, linear kinematics, angular kinetics, angular kinematics, and hopefully it'll all get summed up in a nice bow, okay? So in Newton, remember, Newton doesn't just apply to straight line stuff. It applies to rotational stuff as well. So bigger, faster, stronger, Shaquille O'Neal, bigger, faster, stronger, but also smaller, faster, stronger could also be useful in certain things as well, right? So inertia, resistance to change in object's motion, totally based off of mass. How much stuff do you have? The more stuff you have, the more you're gonna resist. You're in a car with a bunch of friends and you're trying to push it because it ran out of gas, you're gonna tell your friends to get the heck out of the car because it's gonna make it easier to influence its motion with less stuff, okay? Kind of common sense. Inertia in rotational world is called moment of inertia. You're like, wait, moment, we've heard that before. It's like torque, right? Spinning stuff, rotational inertia. Moment of inertia is like if a figure skater is spinning, what happens when they bring their hands in? They spin faster. They have the same momentum, but by decreasing the inertia, it makes it easier to spin. The example I like to use is if you have a shopping cart and it's full of heavy stuff, pushing the cart doesn't matter how the stuff is in the cart, but when you go to turn down the aisles, if the heavy stuff is far away from your hands, you know darn well it's harder to turn that cart versus when the stuff is closer. How that applies to us when we're running and we're trying to make like our shoulders move as fast as we can, we want to bring the groceries closer to the hands to make it easier to move the shopping cart. When we put the stuff further away, it makes it harder to move the shopping cart. We don't sprint like this, right? So bringing the stuff in closer makes it easier to rotate because of the concept of moment of inertia. How much stuff, yeah, but how is the stuff distributed affects its spin. For my physical education majors, you got a merry-go-round and there's 10 kids on it. It's a heck of a lot easier to spin it if all the kids are close to the middle. As soon as they spread out to the end, it makes it tougher to spin. The mass is the same, but how the mass is distributed can affect easier or harder. No different than choking up on a bat, right? If you got 2 strikes on you, so you might choke up a little bit. Bring the mass a little closer, makes it easier to rotate. That kind of stuff. All right, so that is inertia. Second law, in more detail before we apply it, is again F is equal to ma. Kinetics directly proportional to kinematics, cause and effect. Objects resist change in their motion. Well, what's trying to change their motion? Other objects. Okay. The key thing here for Newton's second law is that sum total. Not every force is going to accelerate an object. It takes an unbalanced force. That's like if we're playing tug of war and we're both pulling on the flag with the same amount of linear force. Just because I'm tugging doesn't mean the flag's going to move my way. There has to be an unbalance. One side has to be more than the other to actually change the flag's motion. Right? Okay. There are going to be some terms that I'm going to use, and there's going to be some terms that I will not use. Acceleration, by strictly mechanics definition, does not necessarily mean to speed up. I know you have an accelerator pedal, I get it, but acceleration simply means how much time it took you to change your velocity. That could mean slow down as well. Acceleration is just change in speed. Think about it. Have anybody ever seen Newton's second law say F is equal to md? Anybody ever seen that letter? It's all acceleration, speeding up and slowing down. So to remedy that, at Auburn, we were forced to use directional concepts, negative acceleration. That gets confusing because negative acceleration could mean speeding up or slowing down. In this class, we're going to use super simple terms, speeding up or slowing down. That's how we're going to differentiate between if something's getting faster or something's getting slower. But it's all forms of acceleration, because nothing speeds up or slows down instantaneously. Everything takes time. Our eyes can't process the frames per second, but like if you're watching a batter and they hit a home run, and it looks like that ball changed direction instantaneously, it didn't. Like if we were able to slow it down, you're gonna see the ball collide with the bat and literally get compressed into the bat and then leap off the bat like a bullfrog leaps off of a lily pad. Make sense? So in this class, we'll use things like speed up, slow down, and the inference of time is already there because everything takes time to speed up and slow down. Guys, we do this all the time. I told you last week with 40-yard dashes. We don't, what does it measure? Speed, interesting. How do we report it? Time, how'd you do in a 40? 4.5 seconds, such a speed. So we already do this little trick. Unbalanced forces are responsible for objects that have mass to either speed up or slow down or stay the same. If there's an unbalanced force, that object is going to get faster or get slower. And if the forces are balanced, that object is going to stay the same speed, whether that's 0 or something. 0 is a number, okay? Has anybody ever heard this one, like an object in motion stays at motion, object at rest stays at or change direction? Even change direction is changing speed. Because if I'm running to your left and I change direction, I sped up in this, this way. I wasn't moving that way. Then all of a sudden I started moving that way, and the only way something could go from not moving to moving is to speed up. So even the change in direction, being an acceleration, means it's speeding up in a new direction. All right, second law, angularly. This is going to be important for our muscles. That's how we influence our joints, right? So Newton's second law for rotational objects is moments, rotational forces, are directly proportional to moment of inertia times angular acceleration, speeding up or slowing down in a spin. The merry-go-round, I love that example, because if the merry-go-round is stopped, when you start to spin it, it kind of takes time to get it going. It's going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. It takes time for flexion to speed up, and it takes time for flexion to slow down. Okay? Moments are, what's gravity trying to do to my shoulder rotation? What are muscles trying to do to my shoulder rotation? That's all it is. It's just taking a basic concept that I know you guys have had, but applying it in a way that I don't think most of you have had. And that's spin. Okay. Anything to add?
I guess something that comes to mind is I've been watching, like this past weekend, I watched the track Olympics, and the, like some of the wheelchair like races.
Mhm.
It takes them a while to get going because it's spin that wheel hard. So it's like they end up going real fast. It takes them much longer to get there rather than the normal Olympic athletes where they're just like running.
Yeah.
Same with some of the like amputees that have the blade running. I guess takes them a little bit longer to get up to the speed that they do.
That's a good point. You know, one of the things to Miriam's point is when you're running from blocks, it's a controlled fall. When the gun sounds, sprinters aren't trained to stand right up and start running, right? You're literally taking your hands off the ground and you're falling. And your reaction is, oh gosh, I got to catch myself, right? So you kind of have that element of that start to get going from literally gravity wanting to drop you over. A wheelchair, you got to literally start from no inertia at all. So great points. Third law, the so what? Inertia, objects resist change in their motion. Second law, what's trying to change an object's motion? Other forces from other objects. Newton's third law, well, if an object is feeling some other object, it's impossible for that other object to feel it back. Easy, let me try to restate it another way. We have two objects, object one and object two. Inertia is object one resistance to change its motion. Object two's resistance to change its motion. Two separate applications of inertia. Newton's second law is individual therapy as well. Object one, what are all the things that are trying to change your motion? Separate question. Object two, what are things that's trying to change your motion? Newton's third law is if those two objects are interacting, how are they each trying to change each other's motion? Again, it's impossible for you to touch your Stanley. Did I get that all right? It's impossible for you to touch your Stanley and it not touch you back. You're trying to influence it, and by return, it's trying to influence you. That's Newton's third law. Ground feels me pushing down, I have to feel the ground pushing back up. And the weirdness, and again, interject when you can, the weirdness, and I think I hinted at it last week, is that we need reaction forces to move us. Remember I laid on the table and I tried to run without pushing off on the ground, right? I push on the ground, true, but it's the ground pushing back on me that is actually influencing my motion because I cannot move myself. If I was in orbit around the Earth and I can't, I have to have something acting on me. The Stanley has to have something acting on it. The Stanley can't move itself, okay? So that's Newton's third law. Application of this is profound, right? If the bat feels me, I feel the bat back. The ball feels the bat feels the ball. I'm trying to do work on the ball. Well, guess what? The ball's trying to do work on me. So Newton's third law, it's impossible for an object to feel a force from some other object and that object not to feel it back.
The thing I've seen people have issues with is whenever they think that maybe the weight of the two objects is too different, so one doesn't have an impact on the other. So like, I guess like a crumb from a potato chip is pushing down on planet Earth. The Earth is pushing back up on
That's
the
correct.
ground. That's just where I've seen the issues. We're like, oh, well, it doesn't weigh much, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It does.
We are insignificant in terms of our mass to like planet Earth, right? Planet Earth, pretty big thing. We feel the significant pull from all of the mass on planet Earth. But planet Earth feels our pull back up. It's just insignificant, but it's still there, if that makes any kind of sense, right? The moon and the Earth feel each other's pull. In fact, enough that it affects our tides, and the moon is slowing down our rotation, but it's there. They're not touching, they're not contacting, but they're pulling on each other, they're influencing each other. So I think that's kind of cool. We tend to just think of one facet of it, but we've got to think if an offensive lineman is interacting with someone else, they're both feeling each other's influence. They're trying to move me, I'm trying to move them back. They're not touching me, I'm not touching them back.
I think that a good application of that was the leg press machine or the leg extension machine. When I'm extending my leg, I'm feeling the pad trying to flex.
Absolutely. That's a great application. And that's how, I'm glad you brought that up, Sarah. That's where a lot of this stuff is going to come to play. What is the external force trying to do to you? You feel it, it feels you back. So we typically just think of things from our perspective, but if you're going to be designing equipment, you're going to be helping people in rehab, you kind of have to know how we affect the equipment as well. All right, law of action, reaction. Now, again, it says action, reaction, but it's really force, counter force. Because again, there doesn't have to be motion involved. But if you're trying to open up a jar and spin it, it's trying to create a counter moment to you. The weight is trying to rotate my shoulder down. My muscles are creating a counter moment, trying to rotate my shoulder back up. So force, counter force. All right, let's get to some application. And we can do the leg one as well. I want to start with this one though, because it's linear. Right. All right, you guys. Remember in 310, we analyzed motion joint by joint. That was very important. Sometimes human motion is crazy, a lot of things happening, but we could take a deep breath and say the wrist can only do so many things, the elbow can only do so many things, the shoulder can only do. What is the wrist doing? What is the elbow doing? Where's the shoulder at? We make things simple by breaking it down into parts that we can then understand better. You remember that? We're going to do the exact same thing here. There's a lot of stuff going on. The barbell feels planet Earth pulling down. The barbell feels the right and the left hands pushing up. This bench feels this dude pushing down, and the bench also feels the ground, not planet Earth, the ground pushing up. What's the difference? When I say gravity from planet Earth, gravity isn't happening from this carpet. Like, gravity is the center of mass of this Earth. Like, planet Earth is trying to make me go visit it 3,000 miles down. The ground is preventing me from going and make that trip. Does that make sense? So, what does the ground feel? Well, the ground feels this plus that. So therefore, the bench has to feel this plus that back. What does this person feel? Well, this person feels the bench pushing up. That person feels the bar pushing down. That person obviously still feels planet Earth, but the bench is preventing them from falling. And again, what does the bar feel? Planet Earth pulling down, things pulling up. So you see how we broke it down into each individual object. That bar has inertia. The person has inertia. The bench has inertia. And they all of the Newton's concepts apply to each individual object separately. Let's have a barbell conversation first, okay? Hopefully by now you guys know the concept of center of mass. It's just a concept that represents the sum total of all the stuff. In other words, instead of drawing infinitely many small arrows for every particle, we're just adding them all up and putting them in the middle. The middle of left, right, the middle of up, down, the middle of front, back. That's all it is. Inertia, that bar is going to resist change to its motion. Maybe this isn't a good example of inertia, but I think this is a good one. Anybody work at a gym? What is the biggest problem facing humanity? And that's right, people not reworking their weights. Huge problem. So imagine, I'm working at a gym. I don't know, maybe I have an injury I'm going through. Someone leaves a 100-pound dumbbell on the floor and I have to re-rack it. It's going to resist change in its motion, right? I'd much prefer to re-rack a 10 pound. Simple concept. Resist change to its motion. But that barbell is going to resist change to its motion proportional to how much it weighs, how much stuff is in it. Second law says, well, what's trying to change the barbell's motion? Well, we got two things. Planet Earth, if he just removes his hands, planet Earth's trying to change its motion, and the hands themselves. Newton's second law says we need to address all of the different forces affecting any particular object so that we can play this tug-of-war game of planet Earth's trying to pull it down, hands are trying to push it up. That establishes the tug-of-war. 310, we just said, what's the external force trying to do? What are our muscles trying to do? If those two forces are balanced, all that means is that I spent $100 and I made $100. I'm going to have no change in my bank in my checking statement. Zero. If the forces are balanced acting on this barbell, it's going to maintain the same motion. In other words, was that 135? Y'all remember why I don't say kilograms? Because this is America. I don't know the kilogram conversion, so I say pounds, that's what I know. How much force, to maintain this position for the picture, how much force must his left and right hand feel collectively? 135 pounds. In other words, planet Earth is pulling down at 135. The hands have to be pushing with 135 in order to keep it at the same velocity, at zero velocity. In other words, when you take the barbell off the rack and you hold it there, you are actually feeling what it is. Obviously, that 135 is split between hands, right? Half of it on the left, half of it on the right. This is where stuff gets a little weird. The first motion you're going to see once he lowers it down, the barbell will speed up going down. True? In other words, it's going to get faster in the negative Y direction. It is impossible for that to happen if he doesn't push up on the bar with less force than what he already is pushing up on. Think about it. If he keeps pushing with 135, it's not going to go anywhere. And if all of a sudden he gives more push, it's going to go up. The only way to speed the bar up going down is for this person to let off. Just like the elevator does. When you go down from the 10th floor to the first, and the elevator starts to move, it's a little weird. The floor literally gets pulled away from your feet for a little second. You kind of feel like a little light tummy. In other words, he is choosing to let planet Earth pull with more force than what he's pushing up on. In other words, in layman's terms, he's no longer pushing at 135 pounds. He's doing less than 135. Because if he stayed 135, it would never move. Exercises are a constant fluctuation of our muscles pulling on bone, bone pushing on things, and there's a constant fluctuation of more, less, and the same, depending on changing of motion. The hands are like representations. The hands are pushing because muscles are trying to rotate the shoulder, muscles are trying to rotate the elbow, and my hands are just a representation of the sum total of all those moments. Muscles can only pull, but they pull on bones, and bones can push. Okay? This is cool for you future therapists, personal trainers, anybody, athletic trainers, all of you. If he speeds it up, just like an elevator speeds you up coming down, and he maintains a constant speed coming down, when you're in an elevator going down a long flights, you don't even feel like you're moving. Like you just, is this thing on? Like you don't even realize you're moving. Because everything in the elevator is traveling at the same speed. In other words, you speed up coming down, but you don't keep speeding up because that would be dangerous. That would be free fall, right? So the point is, when you have a constant speed coming down, the forces have to be balanced again. So he's actually feeling 135 pounds the entire time he's coming down at the same speed. He's not feeling less than 135 the whole time. You know how I know that? Because if he was, it would keep speeding up. It would keep getting faster and faster and faster. If I had a scale on top on the elevator, and I looked down and it said 200 pounds, right out loud, 210, 212. Has anybody ever bounced on a scale? Goes further, remember those old school scales? When the elevator starts to go down and the scale literally pulls away from my feet, I weigh less than 200 pounds. But as soon as we all start traveling at the same speed together, I look at the scale, I'm 200 pounds again. Because I don't even realize I'm falling. And then when the elevator goes to stop me, you know this, you feel this. The elevator pushes up on you a little more, and you can actually feel that little extra push up. Because the elevator has to push with more than your weight in order to slow you down. What speeds up must slow down. So at the bottom, we're going to not be chest pushers here. All right? So we're not going to bounce it. But if he goes to put on the brake, exactly. If he goes to put on the brake, his muscles rotating, creating moments at the joints, pulling on bones, bones pushing on hands, you got to do more than 135 to make it stop. You have to. You're doing more than 135. When someone benches 200 pounds, their hands at one point have to be able to push more than 200 pounds. Guys, I can half squat 2,000 pounds. It's going down and going to come back up. You see what I'm saying? In other words, for me to do a repetition, it's not just about it going down or it speeding me up. I have to be able to slow it down, change its direction, and make it come up. And that means I have to be working more than the weight. When I was in undergrad, and why this is kind of important to me for us to understand this, when I was in undergrad, I was taught that eccentric, lowering it down, was doing less than the weight the entire time. And then concentric going up is doing more than the weight the entire time. And then when I got to Auburn and the engineers, they were like, that's ridiculous. That makes no sense. It's a give and take. There's going to be periods of less. There's going to be periods of more. And when you have a constant speed, there's going to be periods of equal. Very important for rehab, especially rehab. What do we always say? Slow and controlled, slow and controlled. You know why? So that you're doing the actual weight through more of a range of motion. Now, I'm not saying slow and controlled is all the way to go for everything. I'm not saying that at all. But when you do explosive things, we have to remember that we're shifting where the work's happening. You know, if you just let the barbell free fall, that's cool. But when it comes time to put on the brake, that just means you're going to be doing a lot more than 135 pounds when it comes to stop. It's okay. So linear kinematics, motion conversations. The bar is going to speed up. The bar is going to have a constant speed because we're going to go slow and control, and the bar is going to slow down. The bar is going to change direction at the bottom. It's going to speed up going up, constant speed, then what speeds up must slow down. It's going to slow down going up. And you have a full repetition. I'm going to say that one more time, probably a couple more times. The linear kinematics of this bench press, assuming slow and controlled, and we're not going to bounce. Speed up going down, constant speed going down, slow down going down. Speed up going up, constant speed going up, slow down going up. In terms of our hands pushing on the barbell to keep it in that position, it's going to tie the weight. It's going to be the same as the weight. When the barbell speeds up going down, we're going to push less than the weight. We have to, because if we stay pushing the same, it will never move. Constant speed coming down, where the only way to keep it constant is if we don't mess with the, think about it, when you hit cruise control in your car, you don't have to keep pressing on the gas. To keep it going at the same speed of motion is the exact same as keeping it motion, keeping it moving at the same speed as zero. They have to tie. You're doing 135 the entire time you keep it moving at the same speed. Linear. Slowing down, coming down, you've got to push more than the weight. It's the only thing that's going to stop it. Not counting the chest pump. Speed up, going up, making it come up, you got to push more than the weight. But to keep it going, I've used this analogy in the past. Imagine this was a heavy bookcase, and we're moving furniture. The hardest thing to do is to get it going, but once it's moving, it's not as hard to keep it moving. Does that make sense? So that would be examples of linear kinematics, discussion of motion in straight lines. The kinetics is the force conversations. Well, what is the bar feeling? Guys, the planet Earth isn't pulling less or more. Like planet Earth is planet Earth. So I think this is really cool. How we vary the motion changes is us. We have to be the ones to do less or do more, to push less or to push more, or to push the same. Planet Earth isn't going to be like, what do you need? You need me to pull more? All right, I got you. We vary it. We fluctuate. And it's stuff we take for granted because when we're put on this earth, we don't know how to control any of that stuff. How many people have ever worked with a stroke patient or someone who had to re-educate themselves? You take for granted, I do the same, brushing our teeth and taking a step. It's not easy things. So planet Earth is the same. Our push varies, all right? Let's get into angular real quick, and I'm going to keep it simple. That bar is trying to horizontally abduct the shoulder. So therefore, I'm going to need muscles that are trying to horizontally abduct the shoulder. Okay? From a moment standpoint, maybe the bar in that position has a mechanical advantage. Maybe the bar is way out here and my muscles are way close here. So from a rotational perspective, what I'm trying to get you to see, and again, the so what, your muscle might be pulling a heck of a lot more than that weight. Because the weight, a lot of times, has the mechanical advantage, and your muscle can't reattach farther away. It's pulling where it pulls. And not only that, muscles have a stabilizing pull as well, right? So you don't even get a full component of that muscle's pull that's trying to rotate you. That's like saying, if I'm trying to spin the merry-go-round, of course I'm going to apply my force perpendicular, but what if I applied my force kind of at an angle into and across? Like, I don't get all of that rotational force. Some of it is transitory and some of it is rotary. What I'm saying is your muscles do a heck of a lot more than what we even give them credit for. A lot more. In fact, so much so, we have neural safety mechanisms to prevent us from doing too much, right? Because it may hurt us. Has anybody ever heard the story of like there's an emergency and superhuman feats of strength, right? That's cases where your brain inhibits the inhibitors and allows you to reach your full potential. You could produce a lot of force. So much so that we have restrictor plates to try to prevent us from hurting ourselves. All right. So we've been doing this in 310. What's the external force trying to do to our joints? That's angular kinetics in terms of the force conversation. The angular kinematics is simply, is it trying to extend me? Is it trying to flex me? Is it trying to adduct me? Is it my muscles trying to abduct me? That's all that is. Angular kinetics, the forces that are trying to influence your motion. Angular kinematics, the motions that we're observing. Make sense? Hopefully. So again, to put a bow in it, and then we'll move on. Linear, straight up and down. We could have a linear conversation with the hands. We could. But all that's saying is that, well, for my hands to go down, there has to be less, and for the constant speed, there's going to be the same. It's very similar. Linear, inertia, F is equal to ma, the sum of all the forces influencing that object's potential change in motion. And then Newton's third law, if the bar is feeling my hands pushing, then my hands have to feel the bar pushing. If the bar is feeling planet Earth pulling, this is weird, planet Earth is feeling the bar pulling up on it. It's just so small that planet Earth is like, I don't even notice it. This always grosses some people out, but it's like having little microbes on you, which we all do. They're there, but we don't really notice them. It's kind of icky. Okay? Anything to add, guys?
I kind of saw this, or like that specific picture when the forces were balanced. I drew the forces. So I drew a downward arrow from the pull of planet Earth on the bar down, and then at the hand, I drew the same length arrow pulling up on the hand. So there's that push and pull, and that's why it's balanced, is because the forces are equal. And then kind of you can play with that more so whenever the bar comes down, goes I think that we let us use the term like who's winning. If like planet Earth is winning or if our muscles are kind of winning in that example.
Yeah. So what Sarah's alluding to is what we call a free body diagram. Not going to be on your test. That's graduate level stuff, but it will, I think, help tie in the point. All a free body diagram is, remember how I said if we're applying Newton's laws, we have to say what object we're talking about. Is it the bar? Is it the person? Is it right? All a free body diagram does is say, okay, I'm going to establish that none of these dry erase markers work. Oh gosh, good. I'm glad the purple one didn't work. Y'all didn't catch the purple joke? All right, here's the bar. All a free body diagram does is say, hey, you know what? It's confusing sometimes when everything's interacting together. Who's feeling what? Because if I draw an arrow and I say the ground's feeling me push down, but in the same picture, I have a picture of the ground pushing up. Well, who's feeling that up? Is that a force the ground feels? It gets confusing when everything's happening at the same time. Separate motion joint by joint. So all we're doing is with a free body diagram, to Sarah's point, is we're gonna just draw the bar for this example, free of all the other stuff. We're not ignoring those other things' influences, but we're not going to draw the hands. We're not going to draw the bench, because all that kind of gets in the way of who's feeling what. All we're going to do is draw the bar and say, what does the bar feel? Well, the bar feels planet Earth pulling down, and we'll give it a name, gravity from planet Earth, or the weight. And then the left side feels a push from the left hand, and the right side feels a push from the right hand. And we label them, whatever we want to label them, push from the right hand. So that's what she's alluding to. Like, it helps to just see the different things. Because again, if I drew the hand, wait, is that arrow pulling my hand? Like, it gets confusing when you draw all the things. Okay? So that's what she's alluding to, making them free and clear of all the distractions and just looking at the different forces, right? All right, so what are you guys going to need to know for the test? Definitions, mostly. And the application. Let's, would y'all, Sarah, to your leg extension, do you mind pulling up a leg extension exercise? Definition and the application is, once we get into specific muscles, and we're going to be looking at moment arms, we're going to be looking at torques, we're going to look at advantages and disadvantages, and there's words for these advantages and disadvantages. It's called levers. It's all kind of different forms of the same thing.
Yeah, this one I know.
Find me. It's not that I don't like it. Let's get one that's like fixed, so that we can there we go. That's cool. That's cool. So angular, rotational, kinetics, forces. What is that padding trying to do to my knees, right? It's applying a flexion push. It's trying to flex me. So in other words, it's trying to flex me is almost kind of like a torque concept. I'm trying to open the bottle. I'm trying to close the bottle. It's just layman's terms for rotational influence. Now that's an external torque from the padding that my legs feel. Well, it's impossible for my legs to feel the padding without the padding feeling my legs. So what are my legs trying to do to the machine? My legs are trying to make the plates go up, right? Through the machine. I don't know what that motion would be called. The machine doesn't flex and extend, but we know that gravity pulling on the plates redirect the forces through the different pulley system. We transfer linear to angular. So that's where we could use kind of linear concepts, right? I'm trying to bring the padding up, or I'm letting it go down. The reason my shin can push, Campbell, you said muscles don't push. They don't, but my shin can push. And the reason my shin can push is because muscles are pulling, right? So the external force is trying to flex my knees, while my internal muscles are trying to extend my knees, because that's where the tug of war is going to be. Planet Earth is trying to drop the bar. My hands are trying to push the bar up. The machine itself can't change how much weight. I mean, I guess if the pin breaks or something, right? But if you have the setting on 40 pounds, it's going to stay that way. So the change in motion is entirely on you. You have to allow the flexion. You have to create the extension, or you have to keep it in a position to take a picture. It's you. Your muscles working through its representation of the shin have to vary. Greater than the plates, less than the plates, or the same as the plates. If you start on the left, let's assume that there's tension there. So in other words, he didn't just step in the rack. So in other words, the stack is off of the plate. If you just hold that position, constant velocity, you're feeling the weight stack. You're actually doing what the weight stack says. But if you go to speed it up, it's just like shifting furniture. You gotta push more than the friction to get it going. That takes a little extra effort. You gotta push more than the weight stack to get it going. If something speeds up, something's gotta speed it up. If something slows down, something's gotta slow it down. That's all we're talking about. So the cherry on top, where would your muscles be having more effort than at constant? To speed up the extension, you've got to push more than the weight to speed up the extension. And then on your way back down, to slow down the flexion. In fact, hopefully this will be the bow on top. When you come down and you slow down the flexion and then speed up the extension, that's what plyometrics is. That's what plyometrics is. Plyometrics isn't its own kind of contraction. Remember, plyometrics is a sequence of contraction. Eccentric, immediately change your direction, followed by concentric, and you have to be working more than the weight to do it. That's why on these plyometrics, like, that's a lot of effort. You're doing more than the weight in order to change its direction. Gravity could change my direction at the top. I could just let off and gravity could bring me back down. But gravity's not going to stop my flexion and speed up my extension. I have to do that. So I better be able to work more than the weight stack to be able to accomplish it. Make sense? Anything else to add? Guys, again, I'm really trying. You got to trust me. On the test, I'm not going to have complex, draw this, draw that. It's going to be layman's terms. All right, guys, let's look at this barbell. If no motion happens, all the different forces on the weight stack have to cancel out. The sum of the forces has to be zero. The only way that barbell is going to speed up or slow down, something's got to be greater than something else. And when we're looking at straight line stuff, it's linear kinetics and linear kinematics, up, down, left, right, front, back. And we're talking about rotational stuff, flexions, extensions, adductions, it's angular kinetics. Forces influence motion. Linear kinetics influence linear kinematics. Angular kinetics influence angular kinematics. Cool? All right, guys, y'all have a good one.